Welcome back to Magic Hour Podcast. Taylor Page here.
I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
This is an episode that I am so excited about. I've shared it on my Instagram stories a few times. I was like, they say don't meet your heroes, but Pam Grossman, she proves that wrong. And she is just the sweetest, kindest, most magical person, which no surprise there. This conversation of the weaving together of creativity and spirituality and bringing our witchcraft into our creative processes is just so beautiful.
I'm so excited. Obviously, that's a topic near and dear to my heart. And I feel like as a creative, as I've developed my spirituality, I've realized the link in such a deeper way and how so often it's like ideas and the flow of creativity come to you in such a similar way that like your intuition or your connection to your angels does. It almost feels like the same channel opens up where you become in flow and things pour out of you. It's really truly feels like magic.
Yeah. And I think it's also very interesting how, you and I met in the comedy world and we're surrounded by actors and artists and writers and musicians of different kinds. And they're all the most spiritually open people. And I think that there's such a connection. And even me getting my start as an intuitive was because I was part of that community and I had infinite people to practice my readings on.
Yeah. I mean, because I think there takes a certain level of like a certain leap of faith when it comes to creativity, right? It's like, I feel this thing inside of me, which is similar to our intuition, or I think it's part of our intuition. It's like, I often call it the call of my heart. It's like this call telling me to go this way, this call telling me to express myself in this way, that I have this gift and that this gift wants to pour out of me. And it isn't, a practical choice. And I think when we choose to open ourselves to the impracticalities of life, that's when we notice the magic, right? Like the magic isn't practical either. It's in the moments where we relax and allow ourselves to open to this wild experience of being human. And I think that's the same as our creativity.
Yes, it's like control and miracles cannot coexist. When we're not in trust, we can't really hear our intuition. And so I think that that's such a good point when we release the rigidity and we have the ability to follow our soul calling or the bravery to walk a creative path. It's also asking us to trust our intuition in such a deep way. That makes so much sense.
Yeah. And also, I think a level of playfulness too. Like, I love how you always talk about playful curiosity when it comes to spirituality. And I think one of the things that has pulled me to a creative life is the act of play. Like, as an actor, that's literally what you're doing. But I think all creativity stems from a willingness to play and see what happens and get back to that almost childlike wonder and childlike freedom. I think the two share that for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also playing creativity is what we came here on a soul level to do. It's like that message I gave a while back in Sitting with Spirit that life is a blank canvas for our soul's art. And I think that when we live in our authentic frequency and live a life of joy and play, like you were just saying, that's how our soul creates art upon the canvas of life.
Yeah, I love that so much. That rings so, so true to me.
Me too. And it's just such a more joyful place to be. Like, I love it.
I feel like my friend group in my community, we've really been talking about that a lot, where we're like, I feel like the thing that draws me to another human is play. Their willingness and choice to be in play, whatever they're doing, whether it's in their work, whether it's in their free time. It's like such a beautiful, energetic to be in that taps us into our intuition, I think, because play is all about being led by your intuition and what the moment calls for and what feels fun. And I think it's such a simple shift of like, how can you play more in your life?
Yes, I love that. And so today we're talking about Magic Maker, which is Pam Grossman's new book. And it's the enchanted path to creativity. And she calls creatives magic makers. I just think that is so beautiful. And I wanted to talk about a section of the book that I didn't get a chance to go into with Pam in the interview, which is her word witchery chapter. And there's a poem that came out a little while ago that I've wanted to share on the podcast. And this felt like the perfect segue or time to do that. So first, I want to directly quote Pam Grossman's book, The Word Witchery chapter. She says, though any form of writing or speaking may have a magical effect, poetry cleaves closest to spellcraft. It is a concentrated form of communication with language distilled and energy condensed. In his manifesto, Projective Verse, the poet Charles Olson asserts that a poem is energy transferred from where the poet got it. He will have some several causations by way of the poem itself to all the way over to the reader. Okay, then the poem itself must at all points be a high energy construct and at all points an energy discharge. Poets pay attention not only to what imagery and emotions they convey through description, but also to how they are conjuring them through sound, rhythm, and vibration, which is why I'd argue the most powerful writing of any form has a sense of poetry simmering within. To be sure, there are plenty of poems that work their magic on the page, and indeed, the format of visual structure of a poem can be spellbinding in itself. But potent poetry takes on a dynamic new charge when read out loud. A poet performing their work often seems like a witch or a magician uttering magic words. And so I just loved that description of poetry, and I couldn't resonate with it more. And I also think that it's no accident that Pisces is the sign that rules poetry, because Pisces, as the final sign of the zodiac, is the sign of archetypal consciousness that has no boundaries. It's just one with spirit. It's universal oneness, spirit, creativity, imagination. And it's exactly this archetype that I see with the magic maker, which is just this ability to dive into psyche and spirit-led places and birth them into physical form. And I think poetry is such a form of channeled writing. And I really loved that quote about it. So with that being said, for a long time on this podcast, I've wanted to share Andrea Gibson's poem that she released. And to me, as a medium, this poem captures the essence of what spirit feels like. It captures the essence of truth, and it's so deep. And I think it perfectly exemplifies everything Pam just said in her Word Witchery chapter. It's a love letter from the afterlife. My love, I was so wrong. Dying is the opposite of leaving. When I left my body, I did not go away. That portal of light was not a portal elsewhere, but a portal to here. I am more here than I ever was before. I am more with you than I could have ever imagined. So close, you look past me when wondering where I am. It's okay. I know that to be human is to be farsighted, but feel me now, walking the chambers of your heart, pressing my palms to the soft walls of your living. Why did no one tell us that to die is to be reincarnated in those we love while they are still alive? Ask me the altitude of heaven, and I will answer, how tall are you? In my back pocket is a love note with every word you wish you'd said. At night, I sit ecstatic at the loom, weaving forgiveness into our worldly regrets. All day, I listen to the radio of your memories. Yes, I know every secret you thought too dark to tell me, and love you more, for everything you feared might make me love you less. When you cry, I guide your tears towards the garden of kisses I once planted on your cheeks, so you know they are all perennials. Forgive me for not being able to weep with you. One day you will understand. One day you will know why I read the poetry of your grief to those waiting to be born, and they are all the more excited. There is nothing I want for now that we are so close. I open the curtain of your eyelids with my own smile every morning. I wish you could see the beauty your spirit is right now making of your pain. Your deep-seated fears playing musical chairs, laughing about how real they are not. My love, I want to sing it through the rafters of your bones. Dying is the opposite of leaving. I want to echo it through the corridor of your temples. I am more with you than I ever was before. Do you understand? It was me who beckoned the stranger who caught you in her arms when you forgot not to order for two at the coffee shop. It was me who was up all night gathering sunflowers into your chest the last day you feared you would never again wake up feeling lighthearted. I know it is hard to believe, but I promise it's the truth. I promise one day you will say it too. I can't believe I ever thought I could lose you. It makes me tear up. And honestly, I know.
It's so beautiful.
I so agree with Pam that it's the most powerful form of word witchery. It really is. It just moves you so deeply. And it's so synchronistic because last night I had like a grief dream about my mom, and I was sent this poem so many times after Andrea Gibson passed, and I knew I wanted to share it on the pod, but I actually personally really needed to read that today too. So there goes those synchronicities that magic makers create that Pam talks a lot about in her book as well.
I'm so moved. And wow, that was so, so beautiful. And, you know, something else I really love to think about as a creative is that I think as creatives, we feel this urge and this pull to create and to put out into the world what we feel is our gift or what we feel is in our hearts. And sometimes it can be really scary and vulnerable. And sometimes it can feel like, what am I doing? Who am I to do this? Does this even matter? And I think every time that you choose to do it and you put your creativity and your heart and your love and your soul into the world, you have no idea the ripple effect of who it will touch and affect. And she probably wrote that because it was what was in her heart and her mind. And she doesn't know you or I, or maybe now she does because she knows, you know, she's everywhere now. But, you know, I always try and remind that to myself and my other creative friends. Like, you don't know how deeply you may touch someone or how you may save them on a day when they needed to smile or laugh or feel deeply or feel seen. Every time you express your creativity, it matters, even if you don't know the extent. So it's just such a noble calling to pour your creativity into the world. And I'm grateful for her for expressing that. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, I know. And like I was saying, as a medium, it could not be more accurate. And I just know there's so many spirit people that are tacking on to using that poem, my mom included, to get their messages across. And so even us being a vessel for spirit's messages is something that Pam talks a lot about in Magic Maker. I cannot recommend this book enough. So I want to introduce Pam now because this conversation is so juicy and her book is so juicy. There's just so many layers to it. Pam Grossman is a writer, curator, and teacher of magical practice and history. She is the host of the internationally beloved podcast, The Witch Wave, and the author of Waking the Witch and What is a Witch? She is also co-editor and co-author of the Witchcraft volume of Taschen's Library of Esoterica series. Her writing has appeared in numerous media outlets, including the New York Times, The Atlantic, Time.com, and many more. She divides her time between Brooklyn and the Western Catskills alongside her husband and their two feline familiars. Welcome, welcome, Pam Grossman. Pam, welcome to Magic Hour. Words cannot express how freaking thrilled I am to connect with you today.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm already having a delightful time. You and I got to speak a little bit beforehand, so this is already fun.
Yes, and I have been a listener of The Witch Wave for many years, and I've also read Waking the Witch, and it's recommended reading in my Healing the Witch Wound workshop. So I am just so in love with your energy, your work, your voice in this space, how well researched you are in this space. It's just so powerful, and I am a fellow Jewish.
Yay! All right.
Yes, with ties to New Jersey as well. Same brew, different Jew is what I was going to say.
I love that. I've never heard same brew, different Jew. That's great. I'm going to have to borrow that.
Please do. So I just feel so connected to your work. I also love the part of the Witch Wave that goes, who is it? Witches. Like every time that comes on, it makes me so happy. Like So anyway, I could go on and on, so I'll cut it there.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And yeah, when people are Witch Wave listeners, it makes me really, really happy because that is a show that is so close to my heart. And as a fellow or sister podcaster, you know, it's a lot of work having a podcast. So getting to connect with people that it really resonates with is very, very nourishing for me. So thanks for saying so.
Yes. And especially having a podcast that you forget there's like thousands of listeners that are listening to you and you're just recording on an island. And then you're like, oh my gosh, you actually heard that. So it's really cool getting that feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes. So we like to start the show by asking our guests, firstly, what is your sun, moon, and rising?
Ooh, okay. My sun is Aquarius. My moon is I'm a Gemini rising and my moon is in Cancer. Yeah.
Interesting. I so see the Gemini rising as like a podcast host and an author and a researcher and a writer. That makes so much sense. And then that intuitive Cancer moon, and then that breaking cycles, doing things your own way, Aquarius sun. I love the manifestation of that big three.
Thank you. What are yours?
I'm a Scorpio sun, Aries rising, Sagittarius moon, and it's almost all in the 8th house.
Fascinating. Okay. All right. Now we both know what we're working with here.
Yes, exactly. Now we've officially met. And so the second question that I like to ask is, how does your intuition speak to you?
You know, what I've realized is that my intuition speaks to me through my body. And this is a pretty new revelation for me as I've gotten older. I'm at the beginning of middle age. I'm 44. And I've always been a really intuitive person, but I didn't quite put it together until fairly recently that intuition is something that I feel. And I am someone who, as you heard, I have a lot of air and I can be very in my own head. I love ideas. I love research. And so it wasn't really until like my 30s that I started touching base more with my body, both in terms of movement and nourishment and things, but also in terms of paying attention to like, how does my body feel when I'm receiving some kind of message from spirit? How does my body feel when an opportunity comes across? How does my body feel when I meet somebody? So I've been trying to pay a lot more attention to my body and trusting the sensations it gives me because the body doesn't lie.
Yeah, for sure. Such a powerful answer. And I always say our body is our biggest divining tool, and everything that we need to know is right here in our body. So I love that answer so much. And I encourage people to just ask their body what a yes feels like and what a no feels like. And in those micro moments, really listen to that, even if it doesn't make sense to our head.
That's it. That's it. Especially because I am somebody who can sometimes get stuck in little loops. I can ruminate. I can really question things over and over. I can second guess things sometimes, but the body, I love that you said it's a divining rod. And it's so true. It kind of like douses toward authenticity and excitement and sometimes places, you know, that maybe you don't want to go into, but it pushes you and says, but there's something exciting over here or intriguing over here. So that's really wise. I love that.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes our head can want to attach to outcomes and stories that we're like, I'm going to pull a million cards to see if this is for me. But the reason we have that frenetic energy is because deeper down our body has a truth that like maybe it's not going to work out that way, or maybe it's not for our highest good, but our head so wants it to be. And so I think coming back down to the body, like self-divination is always an inward spiral, not an external seeking. So I love that.
That resonates with me so much. And I'll just tell a quick anecdote, which is a few years ago, I was offered a book project and my head thought it was perfect. And yet my body was sort of like tense and resistant around it. And I started asking a lot of my friends and colleagues like what they thought I should do. And I'm not usually like that. And I was gathering all of these different opinions. And no matter how much someone was like, well, this sounds really great. It sounds exactly what you want. There was something in me that was resistant. And then finally, I was just like, let me really listen to how my body feels and dive deep. And I decided to turn that book project down. And it ended up being like the perfect thing because, first of all, my other, I suppose you could call her a colleague who ended up doing the book project, did such an incredible job. And it left all this space for an even bigger, better for me project to come through. And so I often realize that when I'm asking way too many people what they think I should do, it's usually because like my body knows what I should do and I'm hoping for a different answer. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I relate to that so much. And it's like playing judge and jury in our head over the truth of what our heart already knows. But sometimes it can be so scary to release control and actually trust that.
Big time. Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited to get into your book today. Oh my goodness. It is such a beautiful offering to this world. And I feel like I bring a bit of a unique perspective, but probably not that unique as a reader because I was a comedy person background. So your chapter on play is like written for me. And I did not know Del Close was a Wiccan. Like, that's crazy.
Yes. This makes me so happy because I know I shouldn't say like my favorite part of the book. I have a lot of favorite parts, but that was easily in my top 3 things I was most excited to write about, things I had the most fun writing about, and sharing the fact that Del Close, who, you know, your listeners and viewers might be familiar with the name, but just to catch everybody up. So improv is really huge now, but there was essentially this, I suppose you could call him a godfather or God's father of improv. He was a real expert in Chicago, and he ended up training everybody from like Bill Murray to Stephen Colbert, Amy Sedaris, Amy Poehler, Tina Fey. I mean, the SNL, you know, depth of background that links back to him is tremendously deep. And he would teach people improv by doing all these different games with them. And a lot of the games were derived from his own interest in magic. And he did, yes, eventually join a coven. And, you know, it's difficult to know exactly how much he was a quote unquote believer. We do know that he had a Wiccan priest and priestess in the hospital with him when he was crossing over. He wanted that represented. So it seems like very important to him. But anyhow, he was really influenced by the world of magic, and it really affected the comedy that he developed and the improv that he developed. And that went on to affect, you know, generations of comedians.
Yeah, that was so interesting. I flew through that chapter, could not get enough of that.
Thank you.
Yes. And it just makes so much sense too, because my background is with a bunch of artists and actors and comedy people. And there's a huge overlap with spiritual people, witchy people. And it's so interesting how improv is almost no different than doing a psychic mediumship reading. You can't pre-plan, you can't be in your head, you have to follow the power, you have to trust the present moment. And I just think that it's no accident that artists and witches / intuitive / spiritual people, that there's a huge convergence of the two, because I also think that it's the people who are on their own healing journeys and are aware of deeper states of consciousness, and both art and spirit are like speaking this language that's incredibly healing, that when we engage with, we help heal the world too.
I think so too. And I'm so glad that you said that, because for such a long time, I really bifurcated my witch self with my artist self, even though there was a lot of overlap, and especially a lot of the musicians and writers and filmmakers that I've always gravitated towards seem to be pretty magical, whether that's the content or the subject matter they were creating, or the style they were creating in, the way they presented themselves in the world. And I'm talking about people like David Bowie, Tori Amos, Bjork. I mean, the list goes on and on. And yet, again, it wasn't until I got older that I realized, wait a second, when I'm casting a spell, I'm really utilizing a lot of the same practices, techniques, intentions that I do when I'm sitting down to write or even make my podcast or perform. And so that's really the nucleus of the book. Magic Maker is about how we can use magical techniques to enhance our creative output. and how we can gain inspiration, how we can bust through creative blocks. You know, it was just a wonderful exercise writing the book and also further integrating that in my own life.
So powerful. And it's full of so much good stuff. I also feel like the timing of when this book coming out is so divinely led. Even what you were saying about that separation and identity of the artist versus the witch. With the North Node in Pisces, we're blending barriers and boundaries, and we're mixing and we're finding oneness. And so I feel like it coming out under that energetic umbrella is so synchronistic, which goes into the augury, what you called transcendental trail tracking. It continues. And so I feel like also with Pluto and Aquarius, and we're seeing more of the shadow sides of like AI and ChatGPT, I feel like we more than ever are outsourcing our intuition to technology and our community to technology. And there's also this almost perfectionism fatigue where it's like everything is just this perfect ChatGPT filtered response that birthday cards, people don't think about them anymore. ChatGPT writes them. You know, everybody has plastic surgery for the perfect face. It's like all of these Venusian realms of beauty and creativity and pleasure are being infiltrated more and more by technology in this way that really sanitizes us from our humanity and what we're doing here. And I feel like Magic Maker is like the antidote energy to that, of like reconnecting with our soul and our spirit and our joy and our creativity, and not just being in this loop of consumerism, but remembering that we're creators.
Thank you, first of all, for that primer on just what's happening in the sky, because I am a fan of astrology. I'm not like a deep astrology head, so I didn't even know about the node and all the things you just explained. That makes me really happy, and I'm so glad you think it's synchronistic. You know, for me, so much of writing comes from this other place, and it feels at its best like it is a collaboration between me and something or someone else. And that is what magic does. It is this beautiful process by which we're able to connect to some other realm, some other source or force. In the book, I call it creative force. Sometimes I call it capital S spirit when I'm being kind of cheeky. And I don't care what people call it. Like, I don't care if you call it God. I don't care if you have a certain deity you connect with when you're writing. It can be the spirit of Del Close, whatever it is. I have just found that when I have offered my work, my skills, my time, my body, my resources to that, whatever it is, I've had a lot more ease in terms of what I am making and how I am making it. Now, to be clear, this is not a replacement for hard work. It's still, I think we're supposed to have labor. I think we're supposed to put our heart and our soul and our time and our effort into the things we make. And to your point, AI seems to want to get rid of that part. And I'm like, well, that's where a lot of the good shit comes from, right? But I also think when we think of our creative processes as this collaboration with something else, it's also not quite so lonely. It's not quite so ego-based. We're less judgmental of what comes out because we're like, oh, I trust that this is what's supposed to come through. And I have obviously, and it sounds like you do too, a whole magical and spiritual context for this. But as I've said to many people who are not super witchy when they read the book, it's like, it doesn't matter. You can go through these exercises and not be a true believer, and it'll still work. It can be a placebo effect. It can be a way you kind of trick your brain to get out of its own way and allow for other things to flow through.
And I feel like that's how spirituality usually is. It's such a gateway drug, you know, like people kind of dip their toe in. And it's like, wait, that actually is more joyful and beautiful than not believing. So what's the harm?
Exactly. And I actually spend a lot of the beginning of the book giving some context for like what magic is and why people misunderstand it. And I've said this many times, but I think it merits repeating that so often when it comes to magic, witchcraft, spirituality, whatever we want to call it, it often gets either trivialized or sensationalized. People either say, oh, this is so stupid. How could you believe in this shit? Like, grow up. Haven't you heard of science? And by the way, yes, and I love science too. Or they say, oh, this is the work of the devil, you know, careful, it's sinful, you're going down a dark path, like keep away from that. It's not divine, it's not godly, it's not safe, it's not good. And of course, it is neither of those things. Like magic, in my experience, it's pretty neutral, and it's just about how you use it. And people have been engaging in magical practice, whether they call it that or not, throughout history, cross-culturally. And so I just wanted to kind of both normalize it and show people that they're probably doing magic even if they don't realize it. Like if you make a wish on birthday candles or an eyelash or a penny, if you have lucky socks, like that's magic. It's like a small day-to-day version of it, but it's absolutely magic. And so we all do this to some effect. And I think it's very human.
Yes. And I loved what you said in Waking the Witch about show me your witches and I'll show you how much you love women, you know, like demonize us or trivialize us or whatever it is, like you were just saying. I so agree. And it's so true. It's actually, I feel, in this course of human history, a more modern development to not believe in magic.
That's totally right. I mean, for most of history, magic, religion, and science were all kind of part of a like continuum, and they sat pretty comfortably together. And, you know, based on everything I've read, it really seems like the project of colonialism and capitalism is what separated that and drove this wedge between what has value and what doesn't. And the reason for that is that if you want to get the most labor out of people, if you want to make the most money off of people, if you want to extract the most resources from the earth, you're going to disenchant it. You know, you're going to make everything about the bottom line and how much you can exploit a certain amount of resources for the most profit possible. And you do that by saying, oh, the earth isn't sacred, or no, there aren't holy days or magical days or lucky days or less lucky days. You know, you kind of flatten everything and leech the meaning out of it so then you can profit off of it. And it also strikes me as a project, you know, kind of demagicking the earth as very like white supremacist and colonial or colonialist, because the people who benefit from that tend to be rich old white men, like generally speaking, and those who profit off of those people. And so there's a reason why, you know, indigenous cultures around the world who speak to their ancestors, like it's not even considered magical. It's just like, oh yeah, of course you speak to the dead all the time. Of course that tree has a spirit in it. Like, of course you can do divination and figure out, you know, how you can guide your life through these signs and symbols and intuitions and messages. And it was really the project of colonialism and white supremacy, which said, oh no, that's all demonic, or that's stupid, or, you know, let's try to control these people and take away that way of engaging with the world. So again, those people could be controlled or profited off of. And so, yeah, I think magic is our birthright. And if we go back far enough in our own ancestral line, we were definitely related to people who were engaging in some sort of magical practice. And like I said, we still see remnants of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could not agree. I also say magic is our birthright. Intuition is our birthright. And I think that the witch is just the version of us that's fully in our power, mind, body, soul. So I think that that's so beautiful. And I think that that also is such a gift that your book, as such a smart, well-researched person, will reach people. Like, I'm a big fan of grounded spirituality that's like practical, ethical, and evidence-based. And this book is full of that energy in spades, and it's going to reach people that wouldn't normally be open to it because of that. And that's such a service in re-enchanting the world and taking our power back. I want to get into your connection to the magic maker, the tarot card, and your practice of getting into magician's mode. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. First of all, I just want to thank you for all those lovely words you just said about the book. And that was certainly my intention to write something magical, but that also had a lot of anecdotes throughout history, that has a lot of research and rigor behind it. So I'm so glad you found that to be so. Thank you. So, one of the archetypes in the book is the archetype of the magician. And this is both the magician card of tarot. It is also the magician that is the deity Mercury, or Hermes, as he's sometimes called in the Roman and Greek pantheon. So it's this spirit of being somebody who can conjure, who can manifest. But crucially, as we see in the magician card of tarot, it's someone who is a bridge between realms. So if you picture the Pamela Coleman Smith illustration of the magician card, it's this person who has one arm pointing up and one arm pointing down. And in front of them, they have this table that's filled with tools. And if you just read into it a little bit deeper, what's represented on that table is every suit of the tarot to come. So the table has a wand, a sword, a chalice, and a pentacle. And so the magician of tarot is usually considered this master manifester and this conduit of energies. And they're able to take immaterial source energy and materialize it here on earth. And then I would say the magician also closes the loop and then offers back that material offering to spirit. So it's this beautiful kind of connection between realms. And the magician is this liminal figure who sort of is this bridge between them. And I was like, well, that's what artists do. That's what creative people in general do. And to be clear, even though in this book, I write a lot about artists, musicians, filmmakers, writers, there are also scientists and business people. Anybody who has ideas and actualizes them in the world in a creative way, I believe, has aspects of being the magician or embodying the magician archetype. So you're right. The magician really is kind of like the guiding spirit of the book, as is the god Mercury, who shows up a few times throughout the book. And I've found in my life, when I really tap into that archetype, it helps me remember what I'm here to do, which is to bring this otherworldly prima materia, to use an alchemical word, and pull it through and refine it and then materialize it and give it shape and form in the world through my art and my work. And so I do have this exercise called Striking Magician's Pose, where sometimes before I sit down to write or work on a project, I'll cast my magic circle. And then I will literally stand in that pose, like the magician card, with one arm up and one arm down. And sometimes I'll even say, I am the magician. I am the magician. I am the magician. And it just helps me remember who I am and what I'm here to do as a creative being who's lucky enough to have a body for a short amount of time. And so a lot of the book talks about how we can get ourselves into magician mode. And there are a lot of techniques, in addition to just that little one I described, to help us shift our consciousness into a place of both receiving divine inspiration, but also having our own power to intentionally then create and form all of those ideas and elements into something that people can then see, touch, hear, interact with, and hopefully be moved and transformed by.
Yes, that's so powerful. And I think that it's so interesting how the magician is that bridge, which is also another word for being a medium. And I really think artists are mediums. And I got this message one time that music exists and musicians are channels and mediums, just bringing it through to the physical world, just like I would a message from people's loved ones in spirit. And I think it's the same for like books and paintings. And what struck me so much about this in the book, that I had never thought of it this way, and it was so eye-opening, was how we are instruments, artists are instruments of spirit here on earth. and how the completed artwork, when it's out in the world, gives the message that spirit wanted to give and unlocks something deep in the recipient's heart. And that's another form of how spirit and angels and guides are communicating with us. And I thought that that was so powerful, and how you would go to art exhibits and look at the finished piece and you would get these strong spiritual messages from them. And I just think that's so powerful.
Yes. And I think everybody can relate to that, because again, even for people who don't have a magical context, or they think they don't have a magical belief system or even magical language, I think most of us can relate to hearing like the perfect song at the perfect time and being moved by it, healed by it, fortified by it, or, you know, encountering a book that completely changes your life. And all of that to me is really divine. And even if it's just something that comes through and it's just really fun and it helps us move and dance, like that's divine too. I think that art is one of the best ways that we can, I mean, I'll use your word earlier, heal, and also just like enjoy getting to be humans here on earth, and hopefully then connect with other humans. Art is a wonderful conduit for connection and interconnectivity. And I do believe that it's all incredibly divine. You know, when I was a kid, I was very lucky. My parents are both artists of different kinds, and I grew up going to art museums. And I'm so lucky that my parents didn't try to be like, oh, let's stand you in front of this Picasso and I'll tell you everything about it. And, you know, they didn't approach it like academics. They were just like, hey, Pammy, just go wander in the gallery, and whatever you want to look at, just like hang out with it and spend time with it. And so I was able to have this really intuitive connection to art at a really young age. And as I write about in the book, I had a little journal and I'd write poems to and with the painting sometimes. And that was another way I was connecting to the art, to spirit, to the artist. I think that's what art does at its best.
Yes. Art fans our inner flames just by receiving the artist's finished project. It inspires us to keep creating. I think that's so powerful.
Yes, creativity begets more creativity. So I'm so glad you got that out of the book, because that's certainly one of my intentions for it. And if I could just quickly address, you know, I do think it's part mediumship. So a lot of the book, I talk about how to be a vessel and receive this. But I do think that's only half of the equation, because I do think if we think about the magician with its two hands, okay, in one hand you're receiving, but in the other hand you are giving. And you're infusing your own intention, your own lived experience, your own skill set into the work. And that takes labor and craft and work. And we also can work with spirit to make that part of the process more easeful and fruitful too.
Yes, such a good point. We aren't just spirit beings. We're also in a physical body, infusing it with our very humanness. And that's what makes it so powerful and resonant. I love that. And I think also this book did exactly that for me, because, you know, I was one of the lucky few to get to read it early. And the moment it came was the moment I was in a bit of a creative rut, creating my mentorship program that I just launched. And so I felt like such a little nod and wink from the universe about getting this toolbox literally delivered to my door at that time. So it's already working its magic.
I'm so happy to hear that. You know, as I said to you earlier, I forget if we were recording or not, but I haven't gotten to speak to too many people who have read it yet, because it's not out in the world. And that is my greatest wish, is that this book really helps unlock people's creativity and helps them make what it is they're meant to make in this world. So the fact that that was helpful for you fills my heart to the brim. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yes. And it kind of leads me into what I want to ask about next, which is this beautiful concept of infusing spells into our creative processes and output. And whether that's infusing an intention or a protection spell or who we want it to reach. And I know that you talked about that in the book, and I was wondering if you could share that idea.
Sure. So that to me is like the other magician's hand. So if one of the hands is about, you know, getting divine inspiration and all of that sort of like disembodied magical energy, then the magician's other hand is about like, okay, but what is your intention for this work? How are you going to craft it? How are you going to add your own style, taste? You know, what are your hopes for this work and how it's going to affect people? And you don't have to have all the perfect answers for that, but I do find it helpful if there's something we can root back to when we're making things. It was really helpful for me, for example, to think about certain poets and certain musicians where it was clear that the way in which they were crafting their songs, their poems, you know, their paintings and so on. There are a lot of musicians, everybody from like John Coltrane to artists like, you know, Leonora Carrington, people who, while they were working, were intentionally trying to like put energy into the work, just like you would when you're casting a spell, and people who were really clear about what it is they hoped their work would express. Now, I want to be careful, and I hear myself being a little halting when I'm talking about this because we cannot control the outcome of everything we put out in the world, just like, and I'm a witch saying this, we can't control exactly how a spell is going to necessarily turn out. I think a lot of people think, oh, you know, you say you want a red car, and so you cast a spell and you get a red car. It's like, that's not how I do magic, and I don't think it's how a lot of people do magic. But you can still cast an intention with a spell or with your work that says like, I would love to be able to move through the world more freely. I would love to have more freedom. I would love for this song to make people feel more free. Things like that. And so that's kind of what that section of the book is about. It talks about different methods that you can use to do that. And so that can be everything from numerology, colors you might want to use in your work that have certain associations with energies, certain deities, certain planets. It can be about the rhythm of your work. So, you know, when we're writing, whether it's a song or a poem or even just writing prose, there's a rhythm and an incantatory vibe that we can intentionally put in our work. And so I go through a lot of different methods that people might want to consider when they're creating.
Yes. And even just all of those suggestions, like your book is such a beautiful, tantalizing sample platter of magic. Like there's so much in there. And I feel like that is even so creative, where you can just shake things up, approach from a different angle, like maybe get very inspired by the color yellow for joy and weave that in an unexpected way. Like I love that. And going back to what you said about casting magic spells not from a place of trying to control specific outcomes or even self-serving egoic connections to some material thing that we specifically want. I like to say when we ask from our heart, our angels always answer. And I think that that's the difference of like a heart intention and coming from a heart place that's like, I want to spread more love. I want more freedom. I want peace. Those are all like heart led. And then the head is like, I want $1 million. I want 3 vacation houses, like whatever it is. So I really like that distinction.
I love how you talk about that. I often in my own life use very clumsy language, which I don't love, but I haven't figured out a better way to say it, where I'll talk about like a high frequency intention versus a low frequency intention. And that doesn't mean low is bad, but I tend to think of a low frequency intention as like, yeah, it's often about money. It's often about how I'm being perceived, you know, it's more egoic, to use your word, where a high frequency intention tends to be about like being of service, benefiting others, plugging into joy and love and exuberance. And I am not someone who thinks we're supposed to rid ourselves of the low frequency. I think that has a time and a place, and we're all human and we need to pay our bills and have shelter and want to live beautiful, adventurous lives. And there's no shame in that, but of course, within reason. And if it's in service to helping other people and living your highest purpose and connecting to spirit. So yeah, I think about those things a lot.
Yeah, me too. And I think especially in this modern day spiritual space that is thinly veiled with patriarchal PR and materialism and consumerism, it's good to think about these things. And I think using your language behind every low frequency intention and manifestation underneath that is a need that we're afraid isn't being met, or a survival mode place, or something that we can shift to high frequency if we just get the message from it.
And I wish more people were as articulate about it as you are and had it as fine of an understanding. I'm thinking about, I don't know, of course, my head is going to like the space of politics right now. We're in a really intense political week when we're recording, although I imagine it will continue to be thus whenever this comes out. And it's like so much of the harm that's being caused, I'm sure at the root of it is fear. It's these people who are afraid of losing power or safety, or this is the only way they learned to receive attention because they didn't receive the love that they should have. And so I try to have as much empathy for that as possible, while at the same time trying to protect the most vulnerable and hopefully stop more harm from being enacted by folks like that.
Absolutely. And I talk about this with uppercase resonance and lowercase resonance. And when we're in our most healed version of self, our resonance is uppercase R. We resonate with love and expansion and joy. But when our shadows are pulling our puppet strings and we're scared and we're in survival mode, we have lowercase resonance R, where we resonate with hateful, fearful, separating rhetoric that does so much harm. And yeah, it's very interesting these times.
That's so good. And of course, the writer in me loves this metaphor so much. That's beautiful. I'm definitely going to have to borrow that, with credit to you, of course. I love that uppercase and lowercase resonance. That's great.
Yeah, because sometimes, I teach intuitive development, and sometimes we mistake resonance for intuition. And sometimes when we're unhealed, we're like, I feel this man is my soulmate and I feel attracted to him and he's resonating with me on like this level, but he's resonating in lowercase resonance, not uppercase resonance. And if we dare to do that deeper inner body check-in spiral, we would hear the truth of that, but it feels too difficult and shameful, so we avoid it.
People ask me all the time, like, how can you tell when it's anxiety leading you or intuition? And I would love to hear your answer. I know I'm not interviewing you, but I would love to hear your answer.
I would love to come on your pod and talk about it too. I have a lot to say about it. Yeah, I talk about this all the time. Fear versus anxiety is a lifelong practice. And I like to say that intuition always comes with a feeling, and that feeling is never anxiety. Intuition always comes with a feeling, whether it's purposeful, a full body yes, excitement, urgency. And even if the message then we feel anxious about it to come, when it comes in, it's never, oh my God, what if? And that's the subtext of fear. What if? Whereas intuition is this calm, quiet, present moment, solution oriented, grounding message that comes with a feeling that supercharges a knowing that it's something other than just a fleeting thought.
So beautifully said. I love that. I agree so much. When people ask me that question too, I answer similarly, which is, if there's a feeling of like anxiety, fear, panic attached to it, you can pretty much assume it's not your intuition, because even if your intuition knows something is to be avoided or dangerous, my experience of it is that it's like very calm and clear. It's not panicked. It's just like, don't go over there, or you should go to the doctor. The end. It's not like a woo, that like spiky, rattling energy.
Yes, absolutely. And it usually is just giving you that next little breadcrumb. I love what you say, following the trail of cosmic breadcrumb. And that's how intuition feels. And there's so much I could say about it, but nervous system regulation is one of the most important foundations biologically of intuitive connection. And intuitive connection is a biological function. It connects in with our nervous system. And actually, when I'm getting ready to do a mediumship reading, sometimes people start to feel nervous before readings. It's our nervous system revving up to raise our energy to a level where we can be that bridge.
Yes.
I think that there's also like a biological healing function. It doesn't mean you can't hear your intuition if you aren't regulated. It means it's harder to believe it as truth because the fearful voice likes to speak over it.
That's so interesting. And I love that too, because There are many times, especially when I'm doing something that's a little bit more public, when I'll feel like nervous beforehand, but I'm also like really excited about it, but they often feel like the same thing. And as I write in the book, I just say to myself, like, if I can be 1% more excited than nervous and let that 1% lead instead of the nervousness and the panic and the fear holding the reins, then I'm doing just fine. It's not about getting rid of the fear and the anxiety. At least for me, that's something that I don't think is possible. Like, I am someone who has anxiety clinically. It's something I manage with a therapist. And I certainly have learned how to be friendly with it, how to expect it, but it doesn't hold the reins over my life, my decisions, and so on. And hopefully that's valuable for other people to hear too. It's not that we're supposed to get rid of our fear. I don't know if that's possible, but just don't let it drive.
And I think all emotions are messengers that serve a function, including fear. And when we feel the fear and do it anyway, that is how we unlock our magic, in my opinion. And in times of heightened fear, I believe it summons our inner archetypal witch that's ready to feel the fear and do it anyway and be indoctrinated into the magic in a more beautiful way.
I love that. And it makes me think of, and I quote this in the book, and I imagine other people know this quote, but David Bowie talked about how when he was working on something, if he felt like he was out of his depth and his toes weren't quite able to touch the bottom, that's when he knew he was in the right place as an artist. And so much of being a creative person is about trying to dwell in mystery. There's a lot that we can't control. There's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of getting out of our comfort zones because we are delving into terrain that is full of mystery and wonder. And that means you do have to have a courageous heart. That doesn't mean you're fearless, but it does mean that you understand that you're going to feel uncomfortable and expect it. And you don't stop making what it is you're here to make because you're feeling that discomfort.
Yes. And it brings me to something that you quote in the book on page 65, the David Lynch quote about ideas being like fish, and to catch the big ones, you have to swim in the deeper, darker waters. And that resonated with me so much. And I think it really fits in here, where feeling the fear and doing it anyway, feeling the self-doubt and realizing it's a good sign that you're up leveling and stepping out of a comfort zone, committing to this bottom hand crunchy experience of being a human while also stretching in both directions, that takes you to the deeper waters where like the most juicy big fish are.
Yes. David Lynch, may he rest. I'm a huge fan of his, certainly of his films, but for anybody who hasn't read his book, Catching the Big Fish, I recommend it so highly. It's a very, I'll call it a deceptively easy read because it's very short, like a couple paragraphs on each page. Like you can read it quickly, and yet it is filled with such like dense, beautiful wisdom about meditation and creativity and how you are plugging into some greater force when you are making things, if you allow yourself to do so.
Yes, I love that so much. And I want to go back really quickly to what we were saying about this political landscape and how intense everything is. And it brings me to another part of the play chapter that I really loved, about how sometimes satire and comedy can be more powerful than any hex because it shifts people's belief and people's consciousness for generations to come. And I feel like in our modern day landscape, South Park is doing that, where it's taking these very intimidating, dangerous figures and just layering it with so much craziness and satire. I don't know if you've been watching the most recent season.
Oh my gosh. If I could add something to this book, and that's one of the problems with writing books, is you have to finish them like a year in advance. And there's so many things that have occurred since I put this book out that I would have loved to have included. The Kendrick Lamar Drake beef. Kendrick writing like the songs that he's written against Drake, that is like worse than any hex you can cast on somebody. To have an entire football stadium like singing along these things about Drake that may or may not be true, but that are, you know, really, I mean, huge accusations of his misbehavior and misconduct. I mean, that is so damning. That's worse than like any spell you can cast on him. And there's a part in that section, I don't know if it's in that section or another section, but I talk about Alan Moore, who's another real hero of mine, the great comic book writer, and he writes novels. He wrote Watchmen, a million other things, and he's a magician as well. And he talks about how the bards back in the day, like if you got sung about by a bard and it was like mocking you, you were fucked for generations because people keep going on and like singing those songs. And he's like, yeah, you could cast a spell on someone and maybe it'll like make them sick or curdle their milk or something. He's like, or maybe even they'll die. I'm paraphrasing. And that's terrible. And I wouldn't wish that on people. But a song can last for generations and generations and hundreds and thousands of years after they leave this planet. And so art can really have that impact too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so powerful and so interesting. I want to pivot to a part of the book and a story that just made me so happy when you were talking about deciding to leave your corporate job and commit to your art and your writing and the witch wave and everything full time. You tell a story about synchronicities that showed you that you're on the right path. And I also really love, parallel to this, when you're co-creating in a creative space, how it has, the project itself has this gravitational pull that brings the right people, ideas, references, inspiration into your conscious awareness to help you create it. So I loved that concept too. So and I feel like these synchronicities go hand in hand with that gravitational pull that was in that time period. So can you share that story?
Yes. So for 14 years, I was working at a corporation called Getty Images. And it's a creative corporation, but it was definitely a corporation. They still exist. It's a big photography company. I was working in their stock photography branch, and it was a pretty great job. I had a few different roles there. By the end of it, I was a director. I was their director of visual trends, which, I mean, I could talk way too long about like the kind of witchy aspects of it, kind of like covertly. But I'll just say it was a job that I liked. It, you know, I was successful by a lot of metrics. I worked on projects that were meaningful. I was paid well. And yet I got to a point where it was clear to me that all of these other projects I was doing on the side, which had to do with magic and witchcraft and art and so on, that was really feeding my soul. But I felt so scared to step away from the security of this job. And I didn't know how I was going to make it all work. Anyway, a lot of different things transpired, which led me to first take a sabbatical from the job. And this was an unpaid sabbatical. And that was really scary in itself, to suddenly like not have income. And, you know, I believe in speaking transparently about these things. I am in a very long-term partnership. I'm married now, but at the time was I married back then? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course I was. So my husband, who I'm still married to, you know, he is also an artist who has a day job. And so I was able to get health insurance through him. And look, he works for a nonprofit. He doesn't make all the money in the world, but it's not like I was doing this entirely by myself. That said, to suddenly have one of our salaries disappear in New York City was very daunting. And I was pretty terrified about stepping away for the 6 months, even though I knew I had to do it. And so I was kind of second guessing it, knew I had to do it. The last day before I was going to go on this break, the head of the whole department was in town. And I didn't get into the details of this in the book, but I'll just say he's usually in the UK. This was not someone I saw that often. He happened to be in town, and he takes me into his office, and he's just like, you know, Pam, I just wanted to say good luck, you know, for your 6 months, and the job will be waiting for you when you come back. And he gives me this bottle of wine to congratulate me. And the wine label is Stag's Leap. And this particular, whatever flavor, or I forget the word for wine, but this particular wine from Stag's Leap was called Artemis. Now, Artemis is my matron deity. I have had the deepest relationship with Artemis. She's the Greek goddess of the moon, wildness, independence. She's associated with deer and bears and the woods. She's my girl. Okay, I have a lot of different deities that I work with, but she's my number one and has been since I was very young. This dude had no way of knowing that, wouldn't have known that. I doubt he even knew who Artemis was. He was just being nice. He bought me a bottle of wine, have a good 6 months off. And I had head to toe, talk about a full embodied intuitive experience, head to toe chills that this was Spirit's way of being like, this is right. You are on the right path. And I still have that wine bottle on one of my altars, like all these years later. And then a few other little synchronicities happened. You know, I woke up that next morning, my first morning of quote unquote freedom, and our alarm clock at the time was set to NPR. And there was a story that came on. And in the background, there's this Jonathon Richmond song. I love Jonathon Richmond. He's one of my favorite musicians. And it was this song called Because Her Beauty is Raw and Wild. And all of the lyrics are very much about this starry, lunar, magical being. And I was like, that's Artemis again. And so a lot of those different synchronicities cropped up, and it just made me know that I was doing the right thing, that I was being guided and supported. And, you know, long story short, during those 6 months, I wrote the proposal for Waking the Witch, or what would become Waking the Witch, my first full-length book. I started the Witch Wave podcast, and the book sold like right before I was supposed to go back to the corporation. And I'll just be candid, like, I knew I didn't want to go back, and that book did not pay anything close to my salary. And yet it was enough encouragement that I was like, I have to devote myself to this and trust this path and do this full time. And so I never went back to the job. And those first few years, listen, we had to really tighten our belts. We had to be super creative financially. I worked my ass off, but eventually I was able to make this my full-time job and my livelihood. And I know it's because it's what I was meant to do. And those beginning signs were Artemis's way of telling me so.
So powerful. And I know that that story is going to resonate with so many people, because I sit in client sessions every single day with people who are just slowly draining their cup at these corporate soul crushing jobs. And they're so afraid to take the leap and might not logistically have the support to take the leap. And it's just so complicated and layered. So those synchronicities and nudges from Spirit are so beautiful and so powerful. And just really quick, I just want to touch on how you explain demons in the book, because I really love that. And I really love how you say, like, these demons of distraction, of insecurity, these different demonic forces are hungry and they get fed, and we co-create with them when we're in those emotional states. And when we can locate them and name those demons, we can make a different choice and disrupt those patterns and get out of that pattern of feeding the demon. And conversely, when we look at the qualities of the different deities we're working, when we embody those, we're feeding and working and giving thanks to them. So I really loved that concept in the book. And I'm sure for those first couple of years, I mean, podcasting is no joke. Until you have a podcast, you do not know how much work really goes into having a podcast. I feel like it's my version of having a kid and like not realizing like how crazy having a kid is. It's almost like a full-time job that you pay to do. And it takes kind of a long time to get to the place where you can actually support yourself, like from a podcast. And so how did your practice of vanquishing the demons in that transitionary period go for you?
Ooh, what a beautiful question. And I want to answer it mindfully. I mean, you know, a lot of the struggle that I have and still have to this day, I want to be careful to underscore the fact that, like, I haven't totally vanquished them. And I don't know that anybody can. It's more that I've sometimes I feel like I've made friends with them, or at least I'm like, all right, I know who you are. And I now have techniques to negotiate with you or again, like not let you be in charge and to understand and name who they are. And that's helped me a lot. It's helped me from letting them run the show, and it's helped me not let them prevent me from doing what I came here to do, even though they're such a pain in the ass, and they still are. You know, one of the biggest demons, and to talk about that section of the book, I talk about 7 primary demons that show up during the creative process. And there's the demon of perfectionism, which I definitely fall prey to sometimes. There's the demon of distraction. There's the demon of inertia, of just like feeling stuck, you know, several others. But the one I save for last, and it's kind of like my big boss, even now, it's the demon of judgment. It's the demon of being afraid of like what other people are going to think. And I still contend with this with my work. Again, not every second of the day. And I've come up with a lot of techniques to not let it rule, but that is certainly something that I battle with sometimes. And so when I was stepping away from my job, oh my gosh, that demon was really loud. That demon was like, I should paint this picture. Not only did the job, you know, pay me a nice salary and there was security, I was getting a lot of attention for my role. I had worked on a few projects around repicturing women in photography and in more like realistic ways. I was really proud of that work. And those projects got a lot of attention from the media. I was speaking at South by Southwest and Cannes Lions, which is like the big advertising festival in France. I was being interviewed by, you know, the New York Times and Oprah Magazine and all these things. And so there was also part of me that's like, the demon said, how can you step away from this quote unquote success? You're so lucky to have this job. You have this success. People are going to think you're a fool. You're stopping this so you could be a fucking witch, like in public. What are you doing? So of course I had that demon of judgment that was really loud. One of the other demons that came up a lot was the scarcity demon, the demon of scarcity. And I write about that very extensively in the book because I think it's something a lot of creative people suffer from. It's this, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. Oh, someone else is in my lane and there can only be one of us writing about witches or writing about art or whatever it is. This idea that there's this like finite amount of resource for people, which some of that is true in terms of like, of course, we're all worried about, or most of us are worried about like paying our bills and meeting our basic needs. And I'm not trying to in any way diminish that. But I think some people do that to such an extreme that it prevents them from taking chances and being brave. So those were the 2 loudest demons when I was stepping away from that job. And I don't know if I'm answering your question well, but how I contended with them back then was just to trust that louder, braver voice, to trust Artemis, to trust, you know, that my body and my heart were leading me in this other direction. And the path was being shown to me. I was being affirmed and shown clues and signs that I was on the right path, and just trusting that path and not letting those demons stop me.
Yeah. And I think what you said about those demons never really being vanquished is so accurate. Like sometimes we can feel those demons and be like, does this mean I'm not on the right path anymore? But the more we hear those demons and proceed anyway and disprove those demons as true, the less we believe the demons when we hear them. Even during this recording, the demon of judgment came out for me when I accidentally said indoctrinated into the magic instead of initiated into the magic. And like 10 times since that, I'm like, why did I say that? It's always present, but the difference is I don't act from it, believe it, or let it tear me down.
That's it. And I have that too. I certainly have my moments of self-consciousness. Like right now, I'm like, oh, I should have put more powder on. I look a little sweaty. You know, like all these little silly voices show up the whole time. I got to tell you, I wrote a whole fucking book about creativity and about the demons that will inevitably come up in this process. And you would think that then I'd be like, got it out of my system. No, this book is coming out, but this book is coming out a month from when we're recording. And of course, I'm like, I hope people like the book. I hope it resonates. I hope it doesn't fail. I hope, people will still pay me to write another book, blah, blah, blah. Like, I have all of that noise in my head. And I have a spiritual practice that supports me through it and that says, all right, Pammy G, of course you're feeling that, but you also are continuously reconnecting with spirit and saying, hey, spirit, please use me as your messenger to help other people, to help them unlock their creativity and make the magic and the work that they're meant to make. And that is like the ultimate higher intention, that I'll use your words, the capital letter sort of intention with the book. I mean, and an even bigger intention than that is so that there's more creativity and imagination and connection and healing and love in the world, because that is ultimately what I think our work can lead us all towards if we make it with, those kinds of high frequency intentions. So, the demons are still with me. They're right here. Hello, demons. I salute you. But I'm still going to do what spirit is telling me to do and what my desire is telling me to do. And that's to, share this book and to talk to people like yourself in hopes that it'll reach the readers and the listeners that it's meant to.
100%. And I think that vulnerability and openness about the struggles with the different demons is what makes you such a needed and powerful magic maker in these times. Because like I was saying, there's such perfection fatigue in this freaking shiny social media era. And I think this realness and this rawness is the truth of being the magician. It's like an alchemical process. And without that truth, the art is going to suffer. So I think that's really powerful. I could talk to you all day. There's so much more I want to say, but I know we're reaching the end of our time. So Pam, I'm sure so many in my community will already be familiar with you, but where can they connect with you? Of course, listen to the Witch Wave. What are all the things?
Thank you so much for asking. My personal handle on Instagram is Phantasmaphile. That's with PHs, not Fs. If you just look up Pam Grossman, you'll find me. My website, pamgrossman.com, is where you can sign up for my newsletter. You can learn more about all my books. You can find out about my events. I'll be, speaking about Magic Maker all over the place for a while, and I would love to see you on the road. I have a Patreon where people, if they join, they can get bonus episodes of the Witch Wave. And also I do monthly virtual rituals. And so you can join and get into some magic. And if you can't make it live, I always record them. So you'll be able to access those for the whole month until the next ritual is ready. And otherwise, you can go to witchwavepodcast.com. You can follow the Witch Wave podcast in your favorite podcasting app. You can watch the interviews from the Witch Wave on YouTube at Phantasmaphile. We've started going into video, as so many of us are doing now. And you can follow the Witch Wave at witchwavepod on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much for such a magical hour.
Thank you. I enjoyed myself immensely. You are so wonderful at this, and I hope this is the first of many conversations between us. Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, the part of the podcast where we sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in the spirit world and give the messages for the collective. As always, take what resonates with you and leave the rest. So I like to incorporate my personal takeaways and lessons in Sitting with Spirit because they're usually also perfectly in tandem with what the collective consciousness is navigating, because on a deep level, we're all one. And I've been sitting with so much heaviness in the collective right now. There's so much grief around what is happening, not only in the United States of America, but also in the world. And sometimes it's breathtaking. And sometimes you find yourself in this endless loop of doom scrolling and looking at just all of the ways that hate is lighting the world on fire. And today I was really sitting with that. And, if you're a longtime listener of the pod, if you're familiar with me and my process, you know that I do something called sitting in the power, which is the spiritualist version of meditation, where you sit in the presence of the spirit world. And sometimes when I bring my own stuff to that sacred space, I call it angel therapy. I don't try to run from the deeper feelings or crunchiness or discomfort. I invite it in to be looked at in that space, and for my guides and my higher self to help me understand what the lesson is for me here to get. And I was sitting in the power today, feeling so hooked into the matrix of doom scrolling, feeling so much existential dread for the planet, for my fellow human beings, for just all of the suffering on such a mass scale. And the message that I got is that when we get locked into a cycle of doom scrolling, we're avoiding a deeper emotional processing, and that it's very common and in our comfort zone, our uncomfortable comfort zone, to be in the mind, to create stories, to try to control, to try to understand, to try to connect with other people's point of views, to try to make sense of things. But humans are deeply emotional beings, and our intuition comes from the heart and from our deeper feelings. And when we avoid feeling the deeper feelings around things, then that emotional message of discomfort and addiction to doom scrolling is trying to get our attention to show us a deeper emotion underneath. And so when we feel this need to constantly doom scroll, that sort of addiction to the stress of it is our inner child's way of showing us that there are deeper emotional currents that need to be felt and integrated and processed so that we no longer feel plugged into this algorithm that is past the point of where it serves us, where we got the information, but now we're just co-creating with dread. And so when I was sitting with that message, I tapped into my inner child and I just realized I needed to cry. I didn't need to go online and see people arguing and get even more discouraged by new headlines and new facets of the way that we're so hateful towards each other and the planet. Instead, I had to really sit with the deeper grief. And in some ways, the external stimuli that trigger us and make us feel crunchy is mirroring deeper emotional things that need to be processed within us. And when we don't feel our feelings, when we only intellectualize them, debate them, talk about them, blame other people, without looking at what our inner child is feeling or what emotional experience is coming up for us. As they say in the therapy world, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And there's so much happening in the political world that's deeply triggering inner child wounding within all of us. And so I just started crying. I started bawling my eyes out because that was my emotional truth. I didn't need to understand anything. I didn't need to hear another news story or way that this current climate is trying to keep us so fatigued and overwhelmed and chaotic. And it's keeping us from actually processing our emotions and to be physically and mentally and spiritually happy and healthy. We have to allow ourselves to feel things. And I think that right now, this connection to doom scrolling shows us that we're very human and we care, and that's a beautiful thing. But I invite you, if you feel stuck in this loop, to actually sit with the deeper emotional response that's underneath it. Where is it in your body? For me, it's usually in my heart and my throat. But feeling in, is it in your gut? Do you just have a bad gut feeling? Are you getting a headache? Where is it in your physical body? And I got this message before that we need to be checking in with our inner child as much as we check in with our spirit guides. That tuning into our inner child as a form of spirit guide keeps us connected to our humanity, our authentic essence, and our emotions. And if you see a lot of people online right now, clearly are acting like wounded children. And I think that right now is this moment where little us doesn't care if it makes sense or what right or wrong is. Little us is afraid, devastated, filled with grief, frustrated. And I think that anger is the safe emotion. You feel kind of, again, that uncomfortable comfort zone of humanity wanting to go right to anger and blame, which I understand. And I've been there too. But I think underneath anger is always sadness on a deep level. And when we can feel that, when we can just admit that we are in deep grief for, in some ways, what feels like the loss of human decency and community and care, even though I know that's not the truth, there are still those things out there, but there's still grieving a level of it too. There's like both simultaneously. And when we can actually feel the truth of those emotions, it unlocks deeper things. Because, for example, when I was feeling the grief over the collective today, and all of the human suffering and all of the fear of just these innocent, beautiful people, it brought up deeper grief around losing my mom and different elements of kind of being at odds with her before she passed in some ways. And there's always deeper things that these external triggers are bringing up in ourselves too. So I really think that through this time of collective intensity and metamorphosis and chaos, for lack of a better word, as much time, if not more, that we're making to think and understand and be informed mentally, we need to make time to feel. And it might not be the answer to like being fully healed and happy. And, it's not going to maybe fix all of your problems, but it's a necessary part of taking away some of that emotional charge that has us moving in a less intentional way, a way where our puppet strings of pain and past trauma and wounding are pulling us instead of our authority, autonomy, an integrated sense of self, a purposeful, authentic, powerful sense of self. And when we don't avoid feeling the deeper feelings, it clears our heart chakra to a level where we can actually create and move forward with more power and authenticity. And that's the version of self that is going to save ourselves. That's going to birth a new, beautiful world. So I think like the powers that be, the news cycle is constantly like, I can't even keep up with all of the horror. And so there is this really important part of just making time to feel the feelings, because if not, we're going to be chronically ill and constantly in fight or flight and in stress. And that these things, to me, in my opinion, are emotional messengers getting us to feel something deeper. And so keep in mind, I record these Sitting with Spirits weeks before the episode comes out, especially this one is like a month in advance. So just know that whatever's going on here and now, I'm not sure at this moment, but I'm sure that if I feel called to speak about this, that it will be relevant for whoever needs to hear it when you come across this episode. And so this reminds me, I went out to dinner last night with a dear friend of mine, Tori Feldman of Sacred Ancestry. She was the guest on episode 118 and 228. And we were talking about how it's really interesting to be a spiritual practitioner in this day and age, to have an online presence, sort of sitting with where our witch wounds being triggered, where it feels, right and aligned to talk about what's happening spiritually versus just sort of being in this place of out of our authentic voice, just saying what everybody else is saying. And does that help us at a certain level? And we were just getting really curious and open. And we both agreed that it's important to speak up and share our voice in ways that feel authentic to us. And she said something that really hit me. She said that people on the spiritual path, who are truly on the spiritual path, cannot float above what is happening politically. And I think that we see that a lot in the spiritual spaces where people are like, oh, this is so 3D and I'm in the 5D and I'm floating above this and it doesn't matter to me. But that's avoidance and that's bypassing, and that is not true spirituality, because spirituality is the fusion of being human and spirit. And if you are truly on the spiritual path, your heart is open and loving and compassionate, because when you do the work to be in your power and self-love, it emanates and affects how you love the world and the people around you. And we can't float above it because, as Tori was saying, we feel it all. We care about it. And that's the true spiritual work, is feeling, caring, and being an agent for love and angel energy on earth while we're here in a physical body. And people always say, like, how can the world really look like this if angels and spirit guides exist? And they only can affect earth to the proportion that we listen to them and to the proportion that we take their messages and act on them. And so floating above an avoidance and holier than thou energy is an egoic construct that is not helpful, definitely not what I would call spiritual. It's something else entirely. So I really loved Tori's perspective on that and how people on the spiritual path feel everything. We're empathetic, we care, and our job isn't to run from that. It's to learn more about ourselves, our soul growth, and empowerment so that we can help heal the world through those lessons. So going into the angel message for the week, the first thing I saw was this like really cool Viking worship. And as this Viking worship was coming into view, I saw all these people like rowing, and I heard this like chanting music, and I saw these really cool navy blue markings on the side of this gray wooden boat. And my association with ships when I see them in readings is something about moving forward, moving on from something, sailing away into the distance. And so when I saw this ship, I started getting this feeling of like focus, keeping your eye on the prize, momentum, and intentionality. And I felt like the energy right now is starting to pick up, and we're getting pushed and propelled forward. And with this, I also felt like it was, so everything spirit shows is intentional. And there was a layer of spirituality, magic, and co-creation with the divine. I felt like this Viking worship, also this chanting, was a form of like ancestral and spiritual connection. And so I just feel like there's something here about mind, body, soul getting on the same page, staying focused, and just rowing in this way that just is a steady movement forward. And I felt really happy about that. And I felt very encouraged by it as I saw it. So stay focused, keep your eye on the prize, and just continue to move forward. And then I saw a symbol of a heart in shadow. And I got a couple different messages here. One is, I felt like there was a sense of maybe navigating a lot of unknown or in-betweens, but I also got this feeling of like joy when I saw the heart in shadow. And to me, it felt very connected to remembering the wild, untamable sides of love. I think sometimes we can mistake kindness for weakness, or think that like the spiritual world is all like love and light. But love also is fierce, and love also is a warrior, and love also protects when its boundaries have been crossed. And I feel like there's something about kind of coming back into the wildness this week that's coming up, coming back into like the quote unquote dark feminine, the women that run with the wolves, untamable return to our primal nature. And so I felt this warrior energy, this power. And I got this feeling that like we're navigating the unknown in so many ways, but as more powerful versions of self. And I feel this sense of staying confident and in our power through the unknown. And it really just was such a beautiful feeling when it came through. I also feel like there's things here of never pretending or never telling yourself the story that a loss of power is ever in alignment with love. Love wants us powerful, and anything that we cannot be our most powerful, authentic, truthful self, anything we lose from that vibration was never in alignment with love. And so it's almost like this sense of our heart coming online in a deeper way. And I just feel like we are walking forward, remembering the depth of our power and the shadow side that maybe has not been encouraged historically, but we're remembering it. And even if we're in liminal in-between spaces, we have more power, confidence, authenticity, and magic than ever before. And then I also pulled a card for the week, and I pulled the 5 of Cups. And the Five of Cups is very much attached to like sorrow and grief and loss. So no surprise there with how much grief I was feeling today when I came to record. And so the Five of Cups, a really important message part of it is that there are 5 cups, 3 are spilled over and the water is flowing down. And this woman is acknowledging that and crying, but 2 cups are still standing up and they're full. And the message here is feel your feelings, feel that sorrow. It's supernatural to grieve those 3 cups, but there are 2 cups standing. And can we focus on what we do have, what is going right, what is in our power, what we can do as solutions or creative forces for good? And so this is really about feeling the feelings, but then shifting perspective to the 2 cups that are still standing and shifting perspective to what is working so that you can start to move forward from there. So there's a lot of layers to these messages. Take, again, what resonates with you. But I think some people are really navigating a lot of grief or loss or endings and needing to move forward. And I just saw this image of the 5 of Cups, and the processing of that is building this personal power and strength and self-reliance that's transforming you into this high priestess energy, the most powerful version of self yet. So continue to have faith in the unknown. And I was seeing toad as an animal guide, like toad/frog. And that's all about leap of faith energy. Just if you know the direction to go in, if you know what you're leaving behind, if you know what Spirit is asking of you, just taking a leap of faith. And sometimes that leap of faith doesn't have to be off of a cliff. Sometimes it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Sometimes it's just taking a leap of faith to start something, to sign up for something, to say no to something. Little action steps that are big to your nervous system. So going into the mediumship, I had the most beautiful boy in the spirit world coming up. I heard the name Michael, so that could be his name or an M name. I just felt this pure heart energy around him. And he just felt so innocent. And I got this feeling from him of like, you know, his family always said, you're an angel. Like there's nothing, you're just an angel. And that's what I really felt with him too, is that he just had so much earth angel energy. He was so kind, and he also just felt so deep and excited about things and just a pure pleasure to connect with energetically. He was an example of just pure goodness. And he told me that he was raised by 3 really strong women. And I feel too like there's just this sense of him never feeling ashamed to be sensitive or deep or like express passion about things. And his message was about masculine healing and how men need to feel safe to love deeply again. And that for generations of consciousness with men, there's this deep wound of them not feeling safe to fully care, fully open their heart, fully be vulnerable. And he was saying that a lot of men are in crisis, and he was also really highlighting teen boys. And I feel like he would have been a teen when he passed. And he was saying that young boys are actually so sensitive. They are just as sensitive as girls, but that there aren't the same avenues or societally expected pathways for them to express that sensitivity. So they get indoctrinated into anger. And anger feels more safe to them and is more in alignment with toxic masculinity than softness, vulnerability. And there was almost this sense too of young boys like not wanting to be cringe or not wanting to show how much they care or just not wanting to care too deeply because it felt vulnerable. And I just felt this need of like young men needing things that they fall in love with, needing like hobbies and creative outlets and friends that they get so passionate about and that excites them so that they don't feel isolated and alone with their big feelings. And I think that, you know, the younger generations can also feel what we as adults feel with the uncertainty for our future as humanity and all of these things and all of these layers and the climate clock and the existential dread. And they don't know what to do with these big feelings. And then people with microphones with hateful rhetoric tell them what to do with those feelings. And I think it's so important to really foster a generation of men that feel nervous system safe to feel, to be vulnerable, to care, to be cringe, to gush, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that, you know, we see it so commonly where young boys just shut themselves up in their room and play video games and don't have the means to express themselves or resist that. And I think it's so important for them to have things in the outside world, even if it's with other men or other boys, just something that they can become excited about and obsessed with, like a hobby or something that really lights them up. That is the roadmap to showing them what it is to truly care and put their all into things and be vulnerable and open their heart. And I think that that is so important. I also felt like with this beautiful spirit boy that came through, there's just this sense of like his passing feeling like a fluke. Like I felt like there was something connected to choking with him. And I got this sense of it being like, why does this happen to the good ones? Like he's such an earth angel. Like how could this happen? And the feeling that I got to was, first of all, I don't like to say everything happens for a reason. I don't like to say, yeah, this needed to happen for this reason, because sometimes tragedy happens and I don't think it's helpful or productive to explain it away with like some cliche. But there was this sense of him just saying like, I know that my life passed so soon, but I had so much love while I was there. And I feel like there was something so old soul about him that it's almost like he came here more to be a teacher than to learn. And he kind of got what he needed. And there's this sense of him now from the other side being so involved as a spirit guide, specifically for young boys that need to tap into their own creative potential instead of stewing in sensitivity that's so big that they don't know what to do with it. So I really hope that this was helpful. I'm sending you all so much love, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Magic Hour Podcast. We are so happy you're here. I absolutely love to connect with you all on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. I love to get your thoughts on each episode, and I get so excited to get your emails to contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss a new episode in your inbox. We have so many amazing guests right around the corner as always. Please make sure to send your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll enter you into an angel reading giveaway with me, which is just my favorite thing, to get to connect with the hummingbird community in that way. You get a bonus entry if you also send a screenshot of your YouTube subscription and also a screenshot of sharing us on your story and tagging us at Magic Hour Podcast on Instagram. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 288 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We so appreciate you sharing the podcast with other magical people, and it really helps us keep this project alive. To learn more about me, my work, to book a reading with me, to take a workshop, please visit angelsandamethyst.com. And remember, you are magic.